Everything here is so expensive. So this is actually my second time in London. To be honest, the first time I was here, I didn't care too much for it. But the more time that I spent here, the more I really like it. I don't think I could ever live here. Something that really surprised me about London is just that it's one of the coolest melting pots I've ever seen. And they do it quite correctly, because you'll find interracial couples everywhere, instead of in a place like LA where our demographic is mostly like, we have a lot of Asian people, we have a lot of Middle Eastern, but the Latin population is huge there. I feel like here in London there's a huge Middle Eastern and Indian and Pakistani population. I believe the Indian and Pakistani girls here are some of the hottest that I've ever seen in the world. But you also have like a ton of Asian people here too, and then people from all other parts of Europe. So it's a really cool melting pot. The difference is, like in the US, I feel that we're a melting pot, but we have so much focus on race, whereas here it feels like more accepting. Like everybody has their own culture, everybody's different, but people don't make a big deal about it. People say that Indian food in London is some of the best in the world because the Indian culture has been so embedded in London for such a long time. I feel like just Asians everywhere we go, we blend in really well. You find that there's quite a bit of racism here in London, or no?
In London, not so much. If there is, it's very like subtle. Outside of London, maybe a bit more, like in the really smaller towns where there isn't that much diversity.
Right.
Because in London, so there's a lot of people that's from other places too. So everyone is kind of existing with each other.
I also feel like there's just so much to see and to do here in London. It feels like every part of town, there's some really cool landmark with historical significance. You have some of the nicest name brands that you'll find in the world. But I think that there's a little something for everybody here. You can go to the financial district, they have really beautiful architecture. If you go to like the downtown area near Buckingham Palace, a lot of the architecture is that Victorian era, Gothic era kind of thing. UK, they preserve their monuments so well. You can tell that they're old, but they're so well maintained. The UK is very proud of their history, and it's something that I admire quite a bit. How have you enjoyed your time here in London so far?
Quite lovely.
What would you say are some of the best things about the city?
Shopping. Vibe, I guess. Kind of like New York, but like cooler because there's more culture.
If you guys are liking the video, please give it a like and think about subscribing. And if you guys want to tip me or donate to the channel, feel free to do so here. It helps me keep the lights on while I continue to provide good content for you guys.
One downside to London though, I think, is the weather. I think everybody complains about it, and it's quite true, especially right now in the winter. It's pretty brutal. The thing I didn't expect is that how short the days are. The sun comes up at like 8 a.m. and then the sun goes down at like 4. And I think it was even worse when we were in Scotland and Edinburgh. It's always just kind of like gray and gloomy. I think London is quite elegant, it's quite fantastic, but there's also a touch of like cynicism that you hear when you speak to British people. And I wonder if the weather has something to do with that. Something I think about, because like if you go to a place like an island, the people are generally a lot more laid back no matter where you go. You can go to Latin America, you can go to Asia. You know, people who live around the beach generally have a similar vibe. Whereas here in London, because it's colder, a little more gloomy, the culture of the people and their personality is also directly related to the weather. You know, just a thought that I've had. However, there is an aura of sophistication that I really admire about London. You can tell in the way that people are just like walking down the street. The style here is fantastic. The term is like posh. That's probably the best way you can describe London and its people and the whole entire vibe here. After going to Asia for a bit and seeing how they do style there, which is a little more geared towards comfort, it's nice coming to a place like the UK, especially during winter, where you can feel that European fashion in full force.
Free this afternoon. My name is Mick. Say hello, Mick. Here he is again.
So we decided to do a hop on, hop off tour. I actually highly recommend it here in London. It's very, very convenient. Even though the hours, it only goes from like 8 in the morning to like 5, right? Is that true? It passes through all the major spots, because we did a few walking tours in the beginning and we saw major stuff, but we had to walk through everything. This allows you to go through all of the sites. You have an audio guide that you can plug in where you can hear all of the commentary too, and you can just get up as you please. What do you think of London so far, Mama?
I like a place. It's just too crowded.
Does it remind you of New York or a little less?
Oh, New York for sure.
What would you say is your favorite part about London?
The historical spots.
The infrastructure in Europe is so fascinating to me, because these cities have been around for ages, right? But they have such great underground metro systems. I think that it's a city of 9 million people, and it does feel quite crowded with a lot of tourists in a lot of places, but compared to traffic in a place like, for example, Manila or Saigon, I feel like they do a pretty good job here, all things considered. One of the biggest things that you're gonna notice about London though is everything here is so expensive. Imagine New York prices for everything, for public transportation, for hotels, for food. but they're in pounds, not in dollars. So everything that we would pay here, you have to increase it by 1.2 to get to the dollar. So it's pretty average to pay around 20 to 30 pounds per person for lunch. You can get like a small lunch, like a sandwich or something, but that is even the lowest I've found is roughly around like 8 or 9 pounds. So you're gonna be paying a lot of money to be here. I've heard from my friends, they've told me London is a cool place to live, not necessarily the best place to visit, but because everything is so expensive for tourists and all the tourist spots are super packed, there's a lot to see here, which is great. I can imagine like somebody living here being able to experience the culture and everything must be a really fantastic experience as well. Also, I've been hearing reports of the London being a lot less safe than it was before. You know, walking around, I don't feel like it's any less safe than a place maybe like Italy. And I guess my frame of reference is Latin America. So compared to Latin America, everything's quite safe.
I know there's a lot of hype around like stabbings and all that kind of stuff, but for the most part, I think it's safe.
Yeah.
I can walk outside at night and I'll be fine.
I hear that muggings in some areas here are quite common, but from my experience, there's so many high-end stores here, people walking around with nice jewelry, nice bags, nice clothes, and it doesn't really feel unsafe, to be honest. And I think it also helps the fact that guns are illegal here as well. You know, that's a concern that a lot of people have growing up in the US. So I find fashion quite interesting here in London because like many cities in the world, you're gonna see two kinds of people. You're gonna see a lot of the people wearing nice business attire, so very elegant fashion. But there's also like a specific street style that is very common here in London. Think like sweats, tights for the girls. You see a lot of like these puffer jackets. That I feel like is pretty iconic when it comes to London street style. I've been listening to a lot of Central C, and how he dresses is how I imagine a lot of the street fashion here is in London. So the first week that I was here was spent exploring London as a tourist. So I got to see all the tourist sites, you know, I got to stay at a nice hotel, and I was with my family, so that was pretty cool. But the second week that I've been here has been with my friend a little bit outside of the city in the suburbs. So I've been able to see how the locals live here in London. I can't shake the feeling that people here are quite, I don't want to say depressed. There's something about the weather and the hustle and bustle of everything that makes the vibe seem very stressful.
I think in general, people can be somewhat cold and reserved. I've heard from like people who've moved to London who are not from London. They find it a bit difficult to meet people, especially like English people. Work is very important. Social life is important, but less so.
It's kind of a similar vibe to how I felt when I was back in the US, whereas like the US is great for a lot of reasons. There's a lot of diversity, there's a lot of really good food options, and London has all of these things. But because everything is so expensive, most people are so worried about making money and trying to pay for everything that it's very hard to enjoy all of the good things that the city has to offer. And that leads me to some other cons, that even though I feel like it's quite safe here, there's quite a bit of like homeless people that you'll see across the city. Spend enough time in the metro, in the tube, you're gonna notice that there are a bunch of weirdos that you're gonna see everywhere. There's like these three guys that sat down on the metro, and then they stuck their feet out like this, kind of like getting into the space of the people in front of them. And then when the people in front of them started saying something, they started getting aggressive and kind of like kicking him. It was weird. I wouldn't say that I felt unsafe in that moment, but I was just like, oh man, this is kind of a weird situation. Like these guys are just looking to do something bad. Here in the suburbs, because it's a lot of immigrants, I find that the immigrants are quite nice. British people have a really cool sense of humor, but at the same time, there's a lot of them that take themselves too seriously. And I don't mean it in the way like they're arrogant, because that's not necessarily true. So something that I noticed here in London, one of the homes for Broadway and theater, you're gonna find a lot of musicals and theater productions everywhere. If you know like theater kids, how they have to like over dramatize everything, they kind of take themselves too seriously. There's a lot of people like that here in London. But there's also a lot of people here, particularly the older crowd, that are just really chill, and you can have a laugh with them and they'll joke about anything. You know, that London dry humor is fantastic. Jimmy Carr is one of my favorite comedians. British humor is very intelligent. There's a lot more layers than like American humor. Also, the stereotype for pub culture here in the UK is very true. I imagine it's because it's cold, it's gloomy, and during the winter, there's not a lot to do because it gets dark so quickly. So what do people do? They go into pubs where it's nice and warm and everybody's drinking. I think it's kind of cool that the drinking culture is such like an integrated part of just like European culture in general. I'm not too much of a drinker, but if I were living here in Europe, I would definitely go out because that seems to be the plan that most people do here.
Right, so if I were to give London a scale from 1 to 10, I would probably give it like an 8.5. I got a couple more Southeast Asian videos I'm gonna release, and then I'm gonna focus on Europe. Huge shout out to my boy Ocean for letting me stay with him. If you guys are into music production, I highly recommend his YouTube channel. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you later. Bye.